Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Corrupt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 2008 World War II film Defiance. Now, Defiance was released in 2008. It is directed by Edward Zwick. It is produced by Edward Zwick and Pieter Jan Berg. The script was done by Clayton Froman and Edward Zwick, based on the book Defiance, The Bielski Partisans by Nekama Tech. The score was done by James Newton Howard, the cinematography by Eduardo Serra, and the editing was done by Stephen Rosenblum. And the stars of the movie are Daniel Craig, Liev Schreiber, Jamie Bell, George McKay, Mark Feuerstein, Alexa Davalos, and Mia Wasiskskowa. Now, based on factual events, Defiance tells the story of three Jewish brothers from Poland who succeeded in usurping the Nazis as they hide out from them in the deep forests, along with other Jewish refugees as they settle into the Belarusian forests, along with other Jewish recruits as they hide and prepare to defend themselves against the Nazis or any other anti-Semite groups wanting to have them terminated. Better known as the Bielski Partisans, it was defined as one of the most largest and successful Jewish factions who stood up against Nazi rulings and held their own in succession. This is different than a lot of the other typical Holocaust films where the Jewish people are often portrayed as being misfortunate victims. But here in this movie, we actually have the Jewish people portrayed in this movie as guys rebelling against the Germans and actually putting up a fight against the Nazism, against the Nazis and other anti-Semitic groups that are also determined to have these guys executed. It was quite peculiar, though, that when the filmmakers, led by director Edward Zwick, arrived on the scenes, they were surprised to discover that the local residents currently living in the area to where the film took place had seemed to have forgotten about such a tale, and what was even more baffling was that there were hardly any Jewish people living there. Zwick leads his audience to explore how they survived, how they organized themselves, how their ethics were questioned, and how their anecdotes can be narrated by the melodrama that was put into the film. Now, I know this is actually based on a true story, but how accurate is the historical references? Usually, sometimes when I read things that are based on a true story, I'm always kind of like put into a bit of doubt. Not because I don't believe that the story is real, but because I know they often tend to over-dramatize events, sometimes even going as far as to change the identities of a person's name, you know, I guess maybe out of fear of retribution or because of so that they don't get into trouble by anybody who is in cahoots with the people who they're being portrayed. But as you know, all same going, if there's any, like they always say at the end of the credits in a movie, if there's anybody whose names or identity has been familiar with, they should not be condemned because it's just simply coincidental and not really necessarily intentional. But there are people who probably might be offended by thinking that, you know, one character or the other characters is being portrayed without their consent. I mean, but like I said, it's unintentional. Okay, so, you know, I don't really recommend people to lose sleep if a character who's portrayed almost to act like a certain member of a certain family. They do this not just for the non-fiction movies, but they also do this, of course, for the fictional movies as well. So I don't think anybody should ever be offended in any way, shape, or form. What did I think of this movie? I will have to say that Defiance has all the essential tools to fit the criteria of a deeply emotional World War II Holocaust story. I mean, it had potential to be a whole lot better, but there is a lot of flaws to this movie, and it's not just because of historical inaccuracies. There were quite probably a few historical inaccuracies regarding the characters, regarding the situations, maybe even the weaponry, maybe even the fight scenes and whatnot. The major anachronism comes from the term of penicillin. Penicillin. Yes, that's the name of the medication. Just to let you know, ampicillin did not come about in the 1940s during World War II. This was a medicine that was invented in 1961. So there's one major historical inaccuracy based in terms of anachronisms. There's probably lots of other ones too, but that's the one I clearly like to point out. But that's not the only thing that went wrong. There's a lot of stuff that went wrong with this film that really bogged it down, which is why I didn't give it a 9 or a 10. I felt at times a bit disconnected with the story, mainly because the emphasis was more focused on the characters within a group as opposed from how they're going to take down the Nazis. The Nazis were the prominent threat to the Jewish refugees, like in the 2004 film The Village. Now, let me ask you a question. Do the Nazis necessarily have to be the primary narrative for this film to work? Not necessarily, but the film does get bogged down when personal conflicts, issues, and romantic interludes get in the way, and at times it feels more like a reality show, and it just lacks the vital substance that the far superior Schindler's List had to offer. The Schindler's List added a lot of grittiness and did not have to reflect too much on human drama. Sure, there's a lot of human drama in Schindler's List, but it wasn't as gratuitous and it wasn't the main focus. Here, there's too much emphasis on this. There's too much issues going on. The battle scenes were few and far between. And this is like coming from a World War II movie where, you know, we are expected to see some more action. We may not necessarily like what we see, but it's there in the clear picture. This is a World War II movie. Now I know you probably may not like to see a whole bunch of dead bodies or a massive body count in this movie, but that's just the reality. That's just the events that happened in World War II that cannot be ignored. Here, it's basically semi-ignored, and the battle scenes look more like a disturbance than to what the actual gist of the story should be. It feels more like a World War II survival story, with some sporadic moments of Nazis in pursuit of finding these resistors and destroying the foundations they created. The action outside the surface of the trailers also seemed very meager. I guess probably the reason why I may have expected much was because I actually looked at the trailers. But it seems like all the exciting scenes happen in the trailers to the point where, why bother watching the movie? Need I say more? The survival story here can depict any kind of period of time. Could even affect today. I mean, in our darkest hours into the future, we probably may have to end up hiding out in forests to survive. I mean, with the situations happening with ISIS and the threats of another possible bombing, it could happen anywhere. Come to think of it, when I think of this, I don't think the human race is really that safe. There's something to think about. It would be grand if we had someone like the Bielski brothers there to help us if needed. I mean, these guys were farmers who were lethal, resourceful, and adept at fighting skills, and just great to lead through these difficult situations. The Bielski brothers consist, of course, of the eldest brother, Tuvia, played by Daniel Craig, the middle one named Zeus, or Zus, played by Liev Schreiber. The second one is named as Aziel, played by Jamie Bell, and the youngest one is Aaron, played by George McKay. So after escaping possible genocide from the Nazis, the brothers retreat into the forest. Kind of almost a bit like a Robin Hood type rebel. And soon they're eventually followed by other Jewish people in the surrounding area who are also hiding out and resisting execution as well, while the news of their hideout causes an outrage as the Nazis are out on hot pursuit looking for them. The eldest brother, Tuvia, is the true leader here, and he declares that all Jewish people must hide, even those not fit for fighting. He's kind of like the peacemaker. There's a little bit of war versus peace here, as Tuvia kind of represents kind of like the peacemaker in the group. He wants to bring more and more Jewish refugees into the hideout area so that neither any of them could be persecuted or put to death. And he doesn't show any kind of prejudices, no walls burned, no walls, built. So, even if you're not a skilled fighter, you're still welcomed into the area for the protection of your rights, your people, your family. No matter what, no matter who you are. You don't necessarily have to be a military man or a person fighting. As long as you're Jewish and you're hiding from Nazism, then it's alright. Meanwhile, brother Zeus, he's the enforcer in the group, and his mindset is on killing Nazis rather than saving his people. And the contrasting concepts between both brothers kind of has a bit of a feeling of today, in the Gaza, between helping their kind while at the same time hurting theirs, while helping our kind while hurting theirs. It's the war versus peace type of thing. Zeus is the war, Tuvia is the peace. The refugee ensemble play pivotal roles in means to survive out there in the wilderness, as they learn to feed their families, even if it has to go at the cost of robbing food. They eventually establish kind of like a health clinic for the sick. They even build a court, and of all things, even though it seems kind of esoteric, they also installed a tanning saloon. Sure, romance becomes commonplace like elsewhere in the world, but I feel that in a movie that has tension and that's building up to your ears, it really doesn't have a place here in this movie, and some of the romantic scenes are just so implausibly too warm for a film of this magnitude. Craig and Schreiber, they play their respected roles convincingly in their own contrary ways of war versus peace. And it gets at times, pretty personal until Zeus eventually gives up hope and joins up with the Russian partisans who hate the Jews just as much as the Nazis do. The most interesting character outside the Bielski brothers is an incompetent, middle-aged man by the name of Shimon Haritz, played by Allen Corduner, who wants in on the group as they ask what he is known for. Appearing to be an intellect, he doesn't really have skills that ring of any kind of significance to the partisans, and he doesn't seem to necessarily be a fighter by trade, but he is still welcome to stay in the group. At the time, the refugees were predominantly cultivators and peasants, while others were like handy craftsmen, artisans, and laborers. Hey, if I was in their position, what good would I be to them? I mean, I don't have necessarily any military background. All I am is just some film critic reviewing movies and posting the reviews on YouTube. What kind of fighting skills is that? I guess I would probably fit in with these non-experienced fighters. In many ways, there are probably more Shaman Haritzes than actual warriors settling there. The best and perhaps the most nuanced performance comes from Liev Schreiber. That's because Zeus Bielski has his sights set on the real reason they're hiding in the first place: to kill as many Nazis before they strike at them. Sure, Daniel Craig is good as Tevye, as more of the peaceful leader, but he's more occupied in being like a mayor and organizing laws and community planning, which might be necessary to some extent but not logical. I mean, their plan is not to stay in the forest. Their way is just to defeat as many Nazis as they come, and then they could go back to their normal lives, if they have any normal lives. With the situations that they're faced, they would have to probably wait till the end of the war before they go back to normal lives. Or at least what's left of a normal life for them. Maybe that's the best way to put it. So as the Nazi goes by, he notices that the Bielskis had turned their refugee camp into a booming village in the wilderness. So as time goes on, it becomes more dire as Nazis and other anti-Semites were coming all the way from Germany, Russia, and Poland. They obey eventually by the Soviet forces, but can't be hoodwinked. And one of the things I liked about this movie is that the efforts succeeded to this many Jewish people. They probably would have never been born had it not been for the Bielski brothers. They were truly a neat group, and you know, this is a study in a history class that never really gets looked upon. I liked the fact that it was original and all that, but I think the execution, the direction in the story, and the way that the story could have had more gist to it, I probably would have ranked it at an 8 or a 9. But of all things, the only thing I could do is give this movie is a 7 out of 10. It was just really badly watered down. Maybe I was expecting too much, but I think this movie could have been a lot better if the narrative would have been a little more focused on Jewish people versus Nazism, instead of, you know, human drama implemented into the story, bogging it down quite badly. That's just my opinion. Well, thanks again for listening into the Writer Review. I hope you all learned of something new every day. If you like to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you like to write back to me, my pleasure. Remember, be kind, be courteous, don't be rude, and I will be back again with another Writer Review. So until next time, this is Eric Writer saying keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.